Alright everyone, we start off today with a characteristic Beijing Biden gaffe. This is the sort of one that's more on the funny side than on the strictly alarming side, although the fact that the person with supposedly access to the nuclear codes is acting in this manner, yeah, that could be a little bit alarming. First and foremost, there will be a pinned comment if you're watching on YouTube with 4 links to 4 other video hosting sites that I use each day, to Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, and Dailymotion. You should join me on one or more of them. At this point, I think I just hit 7,000 subscribers on Dailymotion, which may not sound like a lot, but it's older than YouTube as a platform. And it's French, so it's really funny. Because YouTube keeps algorithmically demoting basically everything that everyone does. If you do independent commentary and there's any politics in it, anything about current events, yeah, you're being demoted. They don't even do it in the active sense, it's a passive sense. But a link in the description. I mean, this is goddamn insane. And just think, over the last 48 hours, we've had 3 major Biden gaffes, and I'm only covering one of them as a main video because you have to pick and choose with Joe Biden. This is the fruitiness of the individual. You have to pick and choose which gaffes to actually focus on if you're doing standalone videos. Otherwise, you would just have like an hour-long stream every day summarizing over the prior 24 hours what he did wrong. Whether it was cringy, you know, just like this, like a basic mistake, or whether it was something slimy or something inept. And you get all 3 with Beijing Biden. But this time, oh my God, and he insults everyone with this. He said that slavery in China, when asked about it, finally getting asked a question that wasn't, hey, what color socks do you have on at the moment? Oh, yeah, I love your dog. Can I pet him? Or something like that. He said that Chinese slavery is just different cultural norms. Again, link in the description. And people apparently, by and large, don't have a huge problem with this if they've got a D after their name. And I'm thinking to myself, if Clinton, or Bush, or Obama, or certainly Trump, or going back to Herbert Walker or anything, had said something like this, they would be facing impeachment. The idea that the Western world can't attempt to stand for its own cultural norms and assert that they are superior. When you can't even say our cultural norms on the issue of human trafficking are superior to those in a country with millions of slaves, your culture is fundamentally lost. How are we supposed to defend the Western world or the United States way of life or any of this other apple pie bullcrap if we can't even if we can't even be honest about our feelings about people being thrown at age 12 or 13 into a fucking sweatshop and worked half to death? I would think that that's something that should be universally fought against, and by and large, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, it's no longer just in the nation of China you have this lower class that's exploited. You still do. They need so much labor, they've begun to exploit people in Africa. There are factories all over East Africa with infrastructure that only Chinese nationals that have migrated there for business purposes are even rich enough to use. You take some African country where the average wages per year are like, $1,000, and that's probably stretching it, and you pay them $1,500 instead of $1,000. That lower class is still being exploited but feels relatively good. But then the Chinese government, centrally planned of course, comes in and siphons 99% of the wealth. It's a form of colonialism that really, if you study the history of colonialism, you'll realize that the different colonial powers had different sort of strategies in mind. So you had the Belgians, which cannibalized their slaves. You had the Dutch just wanted spice, and the UK they wanted gold and glory basically. And the French were arguably the only ones that kind of halfway treated people decently. China has taken up like the worst aspects of Belgian and British colonialism, smashed them together, sprinkled it with the name communism but heavy-handed centralized corporatism, and created a chimera the likes of which the world has never seen. Beijing Biden apparently has no problem with this, is not willing to call out Beijing on its excesses. I wonder why Joe Biden, of all people, would be unwilling to call out what essentially is a slave-driven colonialism. But you've got hundreds of thousands of Uyghur Muslims in China. These are Chinese nationals, too. They're citizens of that nation. literally being enslaved and put out in cotton fields like it's fucking 1845 and you're whistling Dixie, and Beijing Biden doesn't care. Now, I don't really care if he cares. Let's keep this in mind. The United States needs to stop world policing, so I'm not suggesting, well, we need to embargo China until it changes this policy, and they're not going to change it anyway, so it'd be pointless. What I am suggesting, though, is that at the very least, the so-called leader of the free world, the symbolic diplomatic head of Western civilization, and all of this other post-Civil War nationalistic stuff, should at the very least be willing to call out this for what it is. It's not a different cultural norm. By the way, is this not an insult, by the way, to the Chinese? Where in their culture does it say, oh, by the way, we consider slavery to be a good thing? The human trafficking is not only acceptable, but commendable. I don't think Confucius was the one that said that. I don't even think that Chairman Mao went quite that far. He didn't want to enslave people, he just wanted to kill off the surplus population. It's funny because actually Chairman Mao sounds a lot like Ebenezer Scrooge at times. Biden's not even willing to say anything about it, and he had another gaffe the other day. I'll just mention it in passing because it'll show you his mental state, where he was asked like about what it's like to be back in the White House, and he's like, well, when I wake up every morning, I ask Jill, where the hell are we? And it's like, in any other context, it's funny. And it's hyperbolic, and I know what he means to say, which is, wow, you know, I'm sort of awestruck. Now, I was already vice president, and now I'm president, and I'm like, whoa, how did this happen? But he's not really great at explaining himself in that sense, because he's pushing 80 years old, and so instead it sounds like he's literally asking his wife, where the hell am I? Like he doesn't even quite know, like he's not fully aware of the fact that he's actually been elected. This is worrisome behavior. And keep in mind, of course, the danger's not so huge, except in the diplomatic sense, and I should probably mention that briefly as well. The danger's not so huge because he's not really in command of anything. He's not the commander-in-chief. Biden is not your president fundamentally because he's not really calling the shots. You see this with his executive orders. They hand him a piece of paper that's already been pre-written. He signs it. He doesn't necessarily even know what he's signing. Glances over it. It's sort of like Woodrow Wilson or something. In the diplomatic sense, though, and stuff like this matters, it is very, very important for your commander-in-chief to be at least reasonably coherent. This is why Trump succeeded so well in Asian politics. Asian politics, people need to understand, are not the same as Western politics. It's real easy for an American to get along with people in most of Europe, in most of Latin America, and so forth. There's a similarity of culture. In Asian politics, things work differently. I can't remember, I think the New York Times released something years ago where they talked about the different business strategies that were employed in different parts of the world. The difference is vast. The idea of a corporate boardroom a la the US or the UK or something where you've got a man at the top, some managerial classers, some oligarchs, and then everyone else doing what they're told and being delegated to, that's a foreign concept in other countries. Now, there's no necessity that you declare that one strategy or one culture is superior in an objective sense, but when your leader's not even willing to suggest the superiority of not enslaving people, I get a little bit uncomfortable with that. By the way, the cat is being very chatty to her mom at the moment. She gets very naughty in the morning. She gets her treats and then she goes nuts, runs up and down the hallway. Basically like Beijing Biden chasing his dog supposedly before his ankle got sprained or broken, and we're still not sure. By the way, did the legacy media ever ask him tough questions about that? The BitChute exclusive for the day is going to be about Beijing Biden making a gaffe. His black on black crime comments. I probably can't even cover that on YouTube because it'll be too juicy. The dude's nuts. Beijing Biden is off his rocker. Anyone can goddamn see the dude is not playing with a full deck. The problem is that this kind of diplomatic mistake, this is like when Herbert Walker puked on the Japanese prime minister. And if Ronald Reagan said something that was mildly unkind to a foreign leader, it was front page news. If Trump made a tweet about even a third world dictator, he got crucified for it. Biden literally just suggested that Chinese culture is partially prefaced on enslaving people. This is somehow flying under the radar and briefly remarked on by the MSM. It's insane. The wall of propaganda that I'm seeing right now is insane. You got to be insane to think that it's a good idea. By the way, if you don't call out the mistakes being made by a regime, the regime will tend to make more mistakes. Let's just be completely pragmatic about this. We've had examples of this. Some group of people They are in charge. They don't want to hear that anything's going wrong. This was what happened with Pol Pot. This was his entire defense towards the end of his life. Well, people were so afraid of me, they just lied about the rice yields, and I had no clue people were starving. I can almost fucking believe it. With Beijing Biden, it sounds like basically he's being babied by an inner circle and by a bunch of staffers that aren't really telling him what's going on because he's not in charge anyway. And so he's going to keep making mistakes. The problem is if he goes in public, if he speaks at all, he will continue to do that unless that's addressed. And at his age, who knows if he can even address it. That's about all. Peace out.